the one-on-one environment is where introverts thrive. And so their ability to go deep in a 30-minute conversation in a way that feels really natural, it's just the best way to showcase the stuff that you're passionate about talking about. And people who align with your values or like your energy or whatever that might be, and they hear you on a podcast, that just feels like such a natural way to bring new people into our business than be like going out sending cold DMs to people and trying to do ads and lots of lives and things. So I love it as a format. I love it as a way of building connection. I love it as a way of showcasing your expertise in the niche or the industry that you work in, because you get to share in a way that is really genuine and open, but it's kind of a conversation that has boundaries around it. And then you can invite people to connect with you somewhere in your community. And yeah, so it has so many benefits. I just think it's so perfect for introverts.
Welcome to another episode of Listeners to Leads, where I'm helping podcasters launch and maintain a lead generating show. I'm your host, Alicia Galati, the CEO and head podcast strategist behind Galati Media, a full-service podcast management company. On this show, you'll hear my guests and I discuss everything it takes to launch a successful podcast and keep it running. If you're ready to get leads, land speaking gigs, and create deeper connections with your audience through your podcast, then this is the show for you. Today on the podcast, we have Katherine. Katherine is so much fun. We had a blast hanging out before we pressed record, as well as after. I am definitely going to stay connected with Katherine. But today we are talking about podcasting for introverts, why it's so important, why it's a great strategy if you are an introvert who is looking to connect with potential clients, as well as just people who are interesting to you. We have some interesting ideas on, should everyone have a podcast? You already know how I feel about it, but Katherine gives some interesting insight into her views as well on that. Join me in welcoming Katherine to the show. Hello, Katherine. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait.
So if you could just start by telling everyone who you are, what you do, and about your podcast.
Oh, this feels like a big question, even though it's a pretty standard podcast question. I am a business coach, sort of. I like to think of myself more as a space holder and guide for introverts and highly sensitive people who are trying to be seen and heard in the world, cut through the noise when the world doesn't necessarily pump up their introverted strengths, which often leads to us taking on strategies, doing things that aren't in alignment with our not just our strengths, but also just our energy and our truth. And so that is kind of the big passion behind the work that I do, really being a support system for people who just want to do business in a way that feels good for them, even if it looks totally different from the way that we're taught that it's supposed to look. And so that is kind of me in a nutshell, the work that I do. And my podcast is Emerge and Expand, which is it was kind of a play on the launch and grow idea of business, right? But it's just so much about the energy, the actual container of the business that you are creating, like the creativity behind business, as opposed to necessarily focusing on strategy and exponential growth and certain KPIs and markers for success. But actually like what it means to emerge and to put something that you love so much out into the world. And then the expansion that comes in our personal growth, in our own healing, in our energy and our ability to impact and collaborate and have a ripple effect on others in our community. So yeah, I share a lot of my own stuff on the podcast. And then I have an interview series as part of the podcast called Do Business Differently, which is really just talking to incredible people, just finding their own way through this crazy business landscape that we exist within. I haven't ever had to talk about it in that setting, in that way before. So thank you for the question.
Yes, I love what you do as a fellow introvert. I think that it's so important, especially for the introverted, multi-passionate people, because it's like, A lot of shiny object syndrome, which we were talking about before we got on, of like, ooh, great idea. Should we do that? Wait, I have to actually do it. Never mind. New idea, you know? So a place for introverts to really find themselves and figure out where their strengths are and where they can grow a business without having to be the big names in the space or show up on video or on lives or on webinars. Like there's so many other ways to do business. So I love that you're doing that. We're going to get to the podcasting for introverts a little later, but I do want to talk about your first podcast, which we talked about a little bit before we got in. So I'd love to know kind of how you started that, because I feel like most people who are starting a podcast now very strategically and like, oh yeah, been there, done that, we're good, always have that like hidden project that nobody talks about. Or it was like done really sloppily and messily and it's like, I don't want anybody to see that. We're just going to like pretend that doesn't exist, but it got me to where I am today. So what did that first podcast look like for you?
Yeah, it was such a great question. And I know this is going to just hurt your soul because it really was on a whim. And I know that's so against the way that you like to think of podcasting. And like really one of the things that has probably supported me the most in my business over the years, that really has become a framework of the way that I like to show up in the world, has been based on following the energy. So like when something captures my energy or my attention, I just have learnt to trust that. And so sometimes that might look like it's not strategic, or it might look like it's on a whim or going against what like all the industry experts are saying. And it's more just about like, oh, this feels fun. I really want to try this out. And it is random. And it's the opposite of that. It is one of the most successful things that I've done in my business. And I just decided to stop doing it one day. And so it does exist out there somewhere. It was called the League of Extraordinary Introverts. And I am a huge movie lover, so it kind of came from the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, like making that into
Love
like a
that movie.
Thing. And it really was. It was something, no, when I say it was on a whim, it sort of was. It was something that as an introvert, I've been thinking about for months, being something that I wanted to do. And it was around the time where podcasting was still really new. We didn't have Riverside. We didn't even have Zoom. I literally bought a plug-in for, what did we use before Zoom? Skype. I didn't have a proper mic. I recorded on my phone headphones for the first year. And I had connected with another introvert in business, which at the time was really rare. We had kind of connected on social media, and some part of me just said, you should have her as your first guest. And so I just said, hey, I'm starting a podcast. I would love to interview you. And I'm the sort of person that I'll have lots of ideas and things going on and all these things kind of in my periphery. And it won't really happen until I do something to force myself to do it. And that was like the stake in the ground for me. It was like, okay, this is happening. Now you need to work out how to start a podcast. We didn't even have podcasting platforms, Buzzsprout did not exist. I had to pay for SoundCloud to host my podcast, and then I had to go into RSS feeds and work out how to connect all that. It was crazy. And so it sort of started from there, and it just became interviewing other introverts in business. It's not that different from what I do now with the new podcast. It was just that it started to feel restrictive by just being purely introvert focused. And in a time in my life when I wasn't sure that was the direction I wanted to keep going. And so I still have those interviews and I want to repurpose them in some way because they're so fantastic. But it sort of just took a hiatus because I was deciding where to go next. And then the new iteration of it has just sort of evolved into what it is today. I know that was such a long story and answer to your question, but yeah, that's how we got here.
I love that. Going back to what you said in the beginning of following the things that you're passionate about and following the things that you're curious about. And you're like, this is interesting. And I kind of want to do it. And I want to do it a little more. And yeah, we're definitely doing this. I love that so much. I don't know that I am the same way because I do tend to overanalyze things and be like, all right, this is a great idea. And then I've got a business plan for it. it's wild, which is how my brain works. But you understanding yourself and understanding how you work and the best way to follow your curiosity, I think is just so brilliant. And having that thing that's like forcing you to actually take action and like, okay, I talked to this person, we're going to have a podcast episode and I got to figure it out. Yeah. I love it. Like inside I'm like cringing, but I love it.
Such a Virgo, Alicia.
I love it for you and not me. But I think that it really just gives people the idea of like, and I love having people on who have these alternate ideas because yes, there is the way that I do things. And yes, I might think that's the right way, but I know not everybody is me and I know not everybody thinks like me. So it's important to see these other ways to do things and these other avenues to explore podcasting. So when you pitched to be on the show, you said that everyone should have a podcast. And if anyone's been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you know that I feel very strongly about that. And I was like, we should talk about this. So I want you to go first. And then I'm going to come in with my yes and.
So this is a prime example of my media and communications background, like needing to do or say something in a way that's going to catch someone's attention. So sometimes like being super extreme about something is a really great way to cut through the noise. It's so funny that I remember when I got the email from your assistant, I was just like, I don't even remember pitching that. That doesn't sound like me at all because I'm the opposite of that. And when I have sat with it and thought about it, and when at the time when I obviously did as well, what I really mean by that is, and it has a caveat, if you want one, if it feels good, if you're curious about it. This is an experience that, because all of my clients are more introverted, we're so good at talking ourselves out of something that is like, has a little bit of bubble of excitement about it and destroying it before it becomes anything. And so if the pull is there, I just think anyone should follow that, follow the curiosity. When I pitched my first podcast interview and then was like, oh, I guess I'm starting a podcast now, it was always with the true knowledge that if I did 3 episodes and decided I hated it, there was no obligation to continue with it. And I think in business and in content creation and in marketing, there's like all these rules that we think we have to follow. And at the end of the day, what I really care about is I just want to see people talking about things that make them happy and finding a way to do more of that in the world and feel less, caught and tied to the structure and the oppressive nature of the systems that we exist within, and actually just follow the passion. And so if talking about something in a podcast format is something that is interesting to you, even just the littlest tiny spark of getting to talk about whether it's your work or a side passion or just a hobby that you're excited about, I just think, like, why not? It doesn't cost that much. I think it's $12 a month. Buzzsprout, you're not investing huge amounts of money. Like I said, started my podcast with iPhone headphones and always with the knowing that at any time I could stop doing it if I didn't want to. And then maybe down the track I would invest in the fancy equipment if I decided that it was something I wanted to stick with, and then still stop doing it anyway. And so I guess the heart of that message is not everyone should have a podcast, but if you feel like this is something you want to try, why not? So that's kind of my thinking about it. And sometimes you do things because it's a whim and it's just an idea and it's like, hey, best friend, let's start a podcast. This could be so much fun. And then all of a sudden it takes you on a journey that you never expected. Or for me, with my first podcast, it brought in clients, it brought in opportunities that at the time I had just never thought that would be the direction it would go. I just did it because I wanted to try it, and it built my business in a way that I didn't expect it to. And if I hadn't just gone with that little hint of an idea, then that never would have happened. And like I said, I think we can sometimes stomp everything out before we just play with it and give it a go.
You put your heart and your soul into your show. and I want to help you reach all of those potential listeners out there. That's why I'm excited to announce my upcoming podcast marketing workshop. It's about giving you practical tools to grow your audience. You'll learn the secrets to getting your podcast discovered, attracting your dream listeners, and boosting those download numbers. This workshop will be hosted live with a replay available on April 30th. You can sign up by going to galatimedia.com/workshop. Let's grow our podcasts together. Yes, I agree. I think that there are definitely, and this is where like my need for structure comes in, like come in and decide, okay, I'm going to have a podcast and we're going to do this thing. And I want to follow this curiosity that I have and putting a cap on it. So like setting the expectation for yourself as well as your audience, because I think that's important when you're starting a podcast, is like setting that expectation of, hey, this is going to be a limited series. And if I decide that I want to keep going, then I'm going to keep going. But like giving yourself 10 episodes to test it out, see how it feels, have those conversations. And I think that that really puts it in a prettier box, in a more structured box.
Yeah.
Like launching a podcast strategically and still being able to be like, okay, I did that thing and yay for me. I made it to 10 episodes. Also, that was dumb and I don't like it. So like, you can say that and that's okay at the end of the day. So before we hopped on, we were talking about how I personally feel like I am an introvert for sure. I know that I get my energy from being alone, but I also can sometimes feel a little bit extroverted and I get really excited and jazzed. People don't say jazzed anymore, but I say it. So jazzed when I'm in small groups of like 3 or 4 people or one-on-one conversations. And I think podcasting, especially for introverts who are like, nobody look at my face, I don't want anyone to see me. Yeah. This is a great way to have those really meaningful, deeper conversations without the pressure of like other people. Yeah. So I love it for introverts. What have you seen with yourself, your clients, and using podcasts for introverts as like a strategy to connect with other people?
Oh my gosh, I absolutely. And this is probably as well where that comes from, like have a podcast, because I mean, first I want to say that is like such an introvert trait. And the way I think of it is, if we're thinking about the spectrum of introversion, extroversion, ambiversion, however you want to see it, the way I've always thought of it is it's like there's a certain number or a certain amount of time, and then our switch flicks and it's like, okay, now I have to go home and be in my pajamas, not talking to anyone. And so for some people that would be, yeah, okay, I can be in a big group, but I've got an hour in me and then I'm out. And then some people will be like 3 people, anything more than that, too much. And so that's just so indicative of like where on the spectrum we sit for anyone who's curious about that side of things. But when it comes to podcasting for introverts in particular, I absolutely think that it's such a great strategy for building your business, for building your network, for connecting with people. I have connected with people I never would have just even come across because of how fantastic it is as a way to just build other connections when you're not someone who is necessarily going out there DMing people that you love and, you know, sending them messages and getting in front of people and being a master networker. It's actually a really beautiful way to connect with people, because even if someone says no to being a guest on your podcast, there's still an element of connection that comes with being able to connect with someone that you admire and say, hey, I really love your work. That's not necessarily something that I've ever felt comfortable doing just out of the blue.
Same.
Right? It's a really great way to connect with people, learn about their work, or if it's someone that you really love, just asking them, because in my experience, people still, no matter how successful they are, love to be told that their work has impacted you, and also to have the opportunity to get to talk about their work on your podcast, no matter how small it is or big it is or whatever. People rarely say, I've not had someone, maybe one person, say no in all the years because of a timing thing. And so it's a great way to actually practice reaching out to people that you want to connect with and building those connections from the get-go, But the one-on-one environment is where introverts thrive. And so their ability to go deep in a 30-minute conversation in a way that feels really natural, it's just the best way to showcase the stuff that you're passionate about talking about. And people who align with your values or like your energy or whatever that might be, and they hear you on a podcast, that just feels like such a natural way to bring new people into our business than be like going out sending cold DMs to people and trying to do ads and lots of lives and things. So I love it as a format. I love it as a way of building connection. I love it as a way of showcasing your expertise in the niche or the industry that you work in, because you get to share in a way that is really genuine and open, but it's kind of a conversation that has boundaries around it. And then you can invite people to connect with you somewhere in your community. And yeah, so it has so many benefits. I just think it's so perfect for introverts, to be honest.
I definitely agree. I feel very strongly about randomly sending people DMs. I don't like it.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good to me at all. I would break out in a cold sweat just thinking about it.
As a business strategy, oh my God, gross.
No, I hate it.
Don't message me and don't expect a message back.
Right? I did not see this, even though Instagram told you that I did. Yeah. I didn't see it. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm not currently online, even though it says that I am. I'm just scrolling right now. I'm not in the mood for conversation.
I feel like when you have a podcast, as an introvert, it's so much easier because you're not just going to them and saying, hey, I do this really cool business thing and you should totally buy from me.
Yeah.
Instead, you're going at it with, I have this gift I would like to give you, and you're going to have fun and I'm going to have fun. And then wherever it goes from there, awesome. And I think that it also allows us to approach sales in a very strategic way without feeling like the aggressive, extroverted salesman who shows up at your door at 8:00 in the morning on a Saturday and is like, buy my stuff. Ew. We don't want that.
Absolutely.
We do not want that. But when you have a podcast, you can say, hey, look, I have this thing. It's for you. You literally just show up and talk about your stuff. I'll promote it. It'd be cool if you promoted it too. And let's stay connected. And after this, you and I are going to stay connected because I like you. You're cool. Hopefully you like me. I'm not too weird. It's creating that connection, creating those relationships, and see where it goes. And it doesn't have to go anywhere other than you had a great connection and it's a great memory and it's giving value to your audience or the listeners. Another thing that I think people get so hung up on is they think that a podcast, and this is for all the introverts out there who are like, I don't want to interview other people who are in my industry. How do I jump a few steps and connect directly with potential clients? A podcast is still a great way to do that. And I don't think this strategy is utilized enough because people, when they start podcasts, they think downloads. That equates to your listeners being the potential clients. But when your goal is to connect with your ideal customers, then a podcast is a great way to do that. You reach out to your people who are your ideal avatar, your ideal customers, say, hey, I would love to highlight you to my audience. Who cares what that audience is or who they are or are not? Literally just say, I want to highlight you on my podcast. It could be a general entrepreneurial podcast. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Don't even worry about the downloads because your goal is just to connect with that guest and take that relationship further. So I think that people get kind of hung up on downloads and numbers, and it has to be super successful, but it really just depends on what your goals are with your show. And to your point earlier, if your goal is to have fun and explore it and test it out, then don't look at the downloads. Yeah. Just have fun and explore it. And if you're doing that, you've met the goal. And I think so often we get kind of hung up on those downloads and those numbers when it's but what is the goal? What's the purpose of your show?
Absolutely.
Go back to that. Why did you start it? Has that goal changed? Awesome. Now let's move forward from here with a correct strategy for that goal. But if your goal is just to be curious or to explore it, you got out of your podcast what you wanted to get out of it. And then stopping it at that point is like, yeah, I got what I wanted. Moving on. And that's great. I love that so much.
I love everything that you just said. That's such a cool way to approach it. And I'm a massive fan of content marketing as a way of, like, for introverts specifically, because it does feel less of the like icky, salesy, pushy marketing. And it's more about actually bringing people to you because you have really high quality content and you're actually sharing value and giving people tips and sharing amazing strategies that help them to know what you're about, what they can expect from working with you. You know, listening to someone on a podcast, they're in your ears. So it's literally like, oh, this is what it would be like if we worked together. Imagine if I got to have these conversations with this person as my coach or strategist or whatever. And it's also what you can do with a podcast after it exists. So how you can repurpose parts of it, how you can share it in multiple different ways, how that then becomes its own little asset of content that can be reused in so many different ways. And the possibilities being endless of not just how you can share that in different ways, but also how it can invite people into different areas of your business and to be guests and to build those connections and all of that as well. So yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, podcasting is a never-ending fountain of being able to repurpose. Like, it's so great.
Yeah.
I recorded an episode. It would have gone live a couple months ago at this point, but I recorded it today, and it was 15 ways to improve your podcast results today. And I obviously told them, don't do all 15, do like 3 of them. But one of those things was repurposing your podcast content and taking that information. So like literally the 15 ways to improve your podcast, I could turn that into a 15 bite-sized video series. I could turn it into 15 posts, like tips series on social media. I could turn it into a massive blog post where I kind of go into depth for each of the topics. I could use it as podcast content for other podcasts that I can be on. Like, there's so many different ways to just take that one thing and like find ways that are comfortable for you. And I think this is so often as like business owners and introverts, we get sold to by extroverts who are like,
do 30 days of live streams. Yeah.
I don't want to. And it's like terrifying, right? Like the idea of doing that. But like, find what works. Blogging does not work for me, but I can take that transcript that I have of those 15 ways and I can remake that into a blog post pretty easily. And I don't have to sit there and be like, oh, what are the 15 ways? Okay, how do I want to phrase this? Literally just take my words. We might, clean them up a little bit, but generally speaking, it's all right there. And then even like, okay, I don't want to do video, but I know it's important right now. So how can I turn this into video? Quick, bite-sized things. I already have my script. It's already right there. I've already said it. It's not like I need to come up with it again. It's all there. And that makes it so much easier, like finding ways that are gonna work for you, that don't feel icky, that don't feel gross, and are easy. I think so often we want to do things and we're like, okay, I'm going to be a business owner. It has to be hard. Yeah. Yes, there's times of hustle and there's times of like grinding and going and like struggle. Yes, because it's entrepreneurship. Yeah. That's just a part of it. But it can also be easy. There are parts of it that can be easy, and repurposing just makes it easy.
Yes, definitely. I created this thing called the content ecosystem, which is literally about the mindset of that even as you're creating it, you're thinking of like, oh, later on or at some point, or I can pass this along and outsource and get my VA to turn it into a carousel or put it on YouTube. And the biggest question, even as you were talking, that I was thinking is like, what's the lowest barrier to entry? And for me, podcasting is absolutely that, because video, it requires a tech setup. It requires, oh, my hair has to look okay. And, oh, do I have the patience?
Yes.
Like, I live in Brisbane, Australia, and it's already, like, it's only November and it's already, like, almost summer weather. And I've been trapped in this little box all day, which was cool this morning and it's hot now. And I'm just like, if I was filming on video with lights and all of the things, like this would just be too much energy. And the thing that I love about podcasts is you can jump on, you can talk about something you like, you can have someone edit it, you can chat to somebody, and it's so much less overthinking than even sitting down to write a blog post. And then the possibilities are endless of what you can do with that content afterwards that then keeps bringing people back around to the original source, where it's like, hey, make sure you go and check out the full episode here. And it just makes it so easy.
Yes. Do you have that available for people to download or purchase? Perfect. So she's nodding.
Sorry. Yes. I'm really bad at promoting myself, but it is something that I think it's a $37 Australian, which is about $27 US, probably less these days because our dollar is not doing so well. But yeah, it's basically a set of really simple trainings and some Trello boards, some systems from beginning to end, brainstorming your pillar content and then repurposing it, and also how to then turn that into paid offers, because we create so much amazing content and then it's like on your podcast once or it's on your blog and then it sits there for 6 years and like 20 people might have seen it. And it's like, you've got all these amazing ideas. Let's treat them as gold, the gold that they are. Even if they're not, they can always be polished and repurposed. Yes. And, we evolve over time. Like I look back at stuff that I did back in early days of my business and I'm like, this was actually pretty good. I don't know if I could come up with something this good now. It's like repurpose. Don't even try and improve, like do it better. Just actually make a few tweaks based on things that we've learnt. And then you can turn that into introductory offer or a free opt-in or a whole series like you mentioned. Like, yeah, it's just a mindset of not create, in a disposable world that we live in, where everything is like, once it's been on Instagram for 15 minutes, no one cares about it anymore and it will never get seen again.
Yeah.
How do we keep bringing these core pieces of our expertise, our work that we do, that we've created amazing content around? How do we keep bringing it back in instead of continuing to work really hard to recreate when we can actually just keep introducing people to existing content? It's so much easier.
Yes. It's not worth stressing about trying to come up with new things constantly. Yeah, and I think that a podcast is a great place to start as a core piece of content for you to just start with and then repurposing from there, especially if you like having conversations or you like talking to yourself or, like any of those things. Definitely for you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I actually have an interview that I'm thinking I need to contact the person I interviewed because it's such a good one, where she has a 10-minute podcast that's just about mindfulness tips. And it's had, I think it's up to like 10 million downloads now. And it was literally like her hiding in a cupboard and spent a whole day recording it, nearly quit, because it's called The Mindful Kind with Rachel Cable. She's an amazing podcaster. And she was talking about how she nearly quit. And it really ended up becoming the core foundation of her entire business. And sometimes you just have to like get through the bits of uncomfortableness, knowing that the first thing you record is probably going to be the worst thing you ever record.
Yeah.
And maybe there's no strategy, but at some point, some of those pieces start to fall into place. And yeah, it doesn't have to look like an hour episode where you're just talking the whole time. It can be interviews. It can be a 10-minute mini kind of podcast episode. And yeah, just making it easy. Take away what it is that makes it tricky. Know that it's going to be a bit weird talking to yourself at first. And then you just kind of get over it and put it out. And then that's how you grow and you get feedback and you start to see what you can do differently next time. So I agree. It's such a great platform.
Yeah, for sure. This has been so good. Obviously, we're going to stay connected with you. So where can people find you, hang out with you, and listen to your show?
My podcast, Emerge and Expand, is on all the platforms, or you can find it at podcast.emergeandexpand.com. And my business is katherinemackenzie-smith.com as well. Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm sort of all around the place, and I'm sure there'll be ways that we can connect, but you can find me at Miss_KMS on pretty much every platform. Twitter is questionable. I might be deleting my Twitter account, but we'll see.
Yeah.
For now, I'm
if
still
you're in the
sort
future,
of
you
there.
know.
Yes. January, look, I can't promise you anything.
Right. Perfect. We'll make sure that we have all of those links in the show notes. Again, thank you so much, Katherine. This was so much fun.
I loved it so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Listeners to Leads. If you found something in this episode valuable, I would really appreciate it if you shared it with a friend who you know would also get value from it. Want to send me a message? My favorite place to hang out is Instagram. You can find me at alicia.galati. Let me know what your favorite takeaway was from the episode. And don't forget, turning those listeners into leads is actually easy.